Masechet Avoda Zara, Daf Lamed Daled. Rabbi Akiba ikla leginzak beumine mitanin l'shaot o en mitanin l'shaot. One time, Rabbi Akiba traveled to a city, Ginzak, somewhere in Persia. And they asked him 3 questions, and he didn't know the answer to any of them. The first question was, can one fast for a certain number of hours or not? The question, according to Rashi, is, usually if you're going to accept an individual fast, for some reason, then you should do so the day before. Say, tomorrow I'm going to fast, and then you fast the whole day tomorrow. That's an official fast. But what if one did not take upon themselves the fast from the day before? Instead, you woke up one morning and you were kind of busy and didn't eat anything, and it's already noon, and you notice, hey, I didn't eat anything today. So you say, you know what? I'd like to fast the whole rest of the day, and then that will be an official fast. Does that work or not? The difference would be, can you say the special prayers that we say on a fast day, like Anenu, that we add to the Amidah? Or is this a binding fast? Let's say you say then, you say, I'm going to take it as a fast, and then later on you get hungry, so then can you go back and eat? Or once you took it upon yourself as a fast, even though it was at noon, that's it. Now it's a binding fast. That was question number 1. Lahava bideh, Rabbi Akiba did not know the answer. Kankanim shel goyim asurin o mutarim. Regarding jars that were used by non-Jews for wine, can a Jew use them? You just have to wash them off and use them, or do they have to go through a koshering process, like putting water in it for 3 days? Lahava bideh, and Rabbi Akiba did not have the answer to that either. Bameh shimesh Moshe kol shivat yemei hamiluim. Lahava bideh. And third question, how did Moshe serve in the Mishkan for the 7 days of preparation during the inauguration of the Mishkan? During those 7 days, Moshe himself did all the korbanot, and it was only on the 8th day that then he inaugurated Aharon, and then Aharon took over from then on, and the other Kohanim. But for those 7 days, Moshe acted as the Kohen. The question is, what did he wear? Surely he did not wear the Bigdei Kohen Gadol. He was not officially a Kohen Gadol. He wasn't inaugurated as such, so he couldn't wear all the clothing of a Kohen Gadol. So what, he wore his regular outfit from home? Well, doesn't he have to wear something special? What did he wear during that time? And Rabbi Akiba did not know the answer to that either. Ata she'al ben midrasha. So Rabbi Akiba came to the Bet Midrash and brought up these questions. Amre hilcheta mitanin l'sha'ot v'mishlim mitpalel tefilat ta'anit. And so they discussed it in the Bet Midrash and decided that one is permitted to fast for some hours, and then once you're fasting for some hours, decide today will be a fast day. And if he completes the fast, and he says even the prayers of a fast day, he would add that Anenu into the Amidah. Vehilcheta kan kanim shel goyim lachashenem asar chodesh mutarim. And the halacha is that earthenware jars that belong to non-Jews that they used and they put wine in it, is permitted to use them after 12 months. So we talked about yesterday one way of koshering them, which is in putting in three days, water in it for 3 days. And now this is a different way, and that is not using it for 12 months for anything prohibited. And the idea is after 12 months, any taste that was in it is surely going to be gone, and then it is permitted. And some people apply this today for buying china. Advice is not to buy used china, but if one does and it's expensive and so on, then this is one way of making it kosher, is leaving it unused for 12 months. And to the question, what did Moshe wear during the 7 days of inauguration of the Mishkan? He wore a white garment. So it was a special garment, not his regular clothes from home, but it was not Bigdei Kohen Gadol either, because he wasn't Kohen Gadol. So it was a different special garment. Rav Kana matneh behaluk lavan. Shen bo imra. Rav Kana says it was a white cloak that had no hem. What's the significance of not having a hem? Some say that if it had a hem, then people might accuse Moshe, hey, what's hiding in the hem? Did you steal some gold, some stuff, and put it in the hem? That way nobody could accuse him because it didn't have a hem. Okay, maybe. Or maybe the point is that it's a simple garment. It wasn't tailored, perfectly tailored, that would be good for long-term use for an official Kohen. The idea was to show it's a temporary garment, and so it did not have a nice hem. Now back to the Mishnah that says not only is wine of non-Jews prohibited, also grape seeds and grape skins, because there is some moisture there, and the non-Jew might take some of that moisture and offer it for idolatry, and therefore the seeds and skins also are prohibited. A Braita qualifies and says regarding seeds and skins of non-Jews, only if it's moist it's prohibited, because that moisture can be offered to an idol. But if it's totally dried out, then that is not offered, and therefore that would be permitted. Now, when do you consider it moist and when do you consider it dry? Like, how dried out does it have to be? It's still considered moist during the first 12 months. We're not talking about grapes. Grapes you're allowed to buy from a non-Jew. It's in its raw form. It's just a grape. We're talking about after it's crushed, and the juice is, you take the juice out of it to make wine. The rest of it that's still left over, it still has some moisture in it, and they would continue crushing it or soaking it to get all of that taste out of it for 12 months. So still considered moist for 12 months. After that, that's already dry and there's nothing left in it, and so there's no possibility of that being yain nesech. Itemar amar bar hana amar bi Yochanan keshen asurin afilu behana'a keshen mutarin afilu be'achila. Rabbi Yochanan explains this baraita and says, when we say that something is prohibited, seeds and grapes, they are prohibited even to get benefit from it, because if it's moist, then it can be served as yain nesech, and therefore, if it's yain nesech, it's prohibited not only to eat but also to get benefit. And when we say it's permitted because it's all dry, so since it's permitted, it's for sure not yain nesech. There's no way that anyone is going to offer a libation of totally dried out grape seeds, and therefore it's permitted totally even to eat. Amar Rav Zevid, Hay dure deya de chamra de arma'eh, batar teresa yerche shata shareh. A similar law, this sediment of wine that belonged to non-Jews, Arameans, after 12 months, it's permitted. So there's some kind of, some byproduct of wine that is totally dried out, and therefore, after 12 months, it's dried out and is permitted. Amar Rav Chaviva bered Rava, Hanegulfe batar teresar yerche shata share. Rav Chaviva, son of Rava, says jugs that belong to non-Jews that they put wine in. Again, after 12 months, they are permitted. A similar law that we just saw. Amar Rav Chaviva, Hane abata de taya'e batar teresa yerche shata share. Rav Chaviva says that canteens made out of skin, leather, that belong to Arabs, after 12 months, they are permitted. Same idea. Because they're canteens, they're made for long-term storage, and that's the problem. So the wine is going to soak in it for a long time. It's going to absorb taste of the wine, but one way to use it is just not use it for anything not kosher for 12 months, and then that taste will already be gone. Amar Rav Acha bered Rav Ika, Hane pursane darma'e batar teresa yerche shata share. Rav Acha, son of Rav Ika, says Aramean grape pits after 12 months is permitted. Again, all the taste is gone from them after 12 months. Amar Rav Acha bered Rava, Hane gulfe shechime ve'ukame batar teresa yerche shata share. And Rav Acha, son of Rava, says brown and black jugs, if you leave them without anything not kosher in it, for 12 months, then they are permitted. And these are jugs that we talked about different color jugs yesterday. So these might be jugs that are used for temporary use or don't absorb a lot. But here, it's even if it does, you're leaving it for 12 months, and so by that time any taste in it would be gone. Ve'hamoriyas tenor Rabbanan moriyas uman mutar. Back to the Mishnah, it says fish stew is prohibited because sometimes when they would prepare the fish stew, they would add wine. And so if a non-Jew is making the fish stew, he might add wine, and that might be yayin nesech, and so therefore one cannot buy the fish stew from non-Jews. But a baraita says if it's made by an expert, by a professional, it's permitted. This is how it works. If they caught a fish, they would eat the meat, whatever, but the rest of it, the fatty parts, it's not immediately edible, but it's good nutrition there. So they would take all these leftover parts of the fish and put them in brine, in the salt water, and that brine would suck out all of the taste and the fats from the fish. And then it took a long time. It was kind of like a salting or pickling, and then they would eat that. It would be a very strong taste. Then they would take that same fish and they put it into a second time, a new brine, to take more of the taste out of it. And so they'd keep doing that until there was absolutely nothing left from these fish parts. So if you make it professionally, then you suck out all the fat, and the fat is what gives it its richness and its taste, and you don't have to put any wine in it. Actually, putting wine would make it worse, because it would interact badly with the fat. So professionals who know what they're doing do not put wine in it, and therefore even non-Jewish fish stew is permitted. And they also only use kosher fish. Rabbi Yehuda ben Gamliel omer mishum Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel af chilak uman mutar. And Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Gamliel, says in the name of Rabbi Chanina, the son of Gamliel, that this dish called chilak, if it's prepared by an expert, is also permitted. And this is also some kind of slices of salted fish or fish sauce. And again, the official way to make it is without wine, so as long as it's made by a professional, that's okay. Taneh Abimi bered Rav Abhu Morias Uman Mutar. Abimi son of Rabbi says fish stew prepared by an expert is permitted. Same reason. Hu Taneh Lab Hu Amarla. He taught that this baraita, and he also gave an explanation. Pam Rishon V'Sheni Mutar Shelishi Asur. Mai Ta'ama Pam Rishon V'Sheni Denafish Shumnaihu Lasarich Leminme Behu Chamra Mikan Ve'elach Remu Behu Hamra. The first 2 times that you put these fish parts into brine, it's permitted to eat that fish stew. If it's from the first time you put it in, or you take those fish parts out and put them in a second time into brine to get more of the taste out, that's permitted because there's still a lot of fat. But the third time, then that fish stew is prohibited. Why? Because the first 2 times, since there's a lot of fat, you don't have to put wine in it. It already is very tasty. But by the time you get to the third one, there's already very little fat in there, very little fish oil. And so in order to give it more taste, that's when people would add wine. So the first 2 batches, you don't have to. And that would be the ones that are made by the professionals. This is official ones. That's going to be nice and rich and without wine. Already by the third one, that's not professional fish stew, but people would just add wine, kind of like diluting it to get some kind of fish taste out of it. Since they would put wine, that third batch is prohibited. Hahu arba de moraisa de atele nmela de ako otib de biabu de min ako nutare behade. And that was a story about a boat that brought fish stew, and it came into the port of Akko. And Rabbi Abba, who lived in Akko, put a mashgiach, a guard over it, to make sure that nobody would add wine to the fish stew, and then it would be permitted for the Jews to eat from it. Amar le Rava, Rava says, what's the point of putting a mashgiach from now on? Maybe someone added wine beforehand. This boat came from some other place, and maybe someone added wine beforehand. What's the point of watching it from now on when you don't know if there was wine that was added beforehand? And so Rabbi Abba answered, "What are you concerned about from before this? Are you concerned that someone put wine in it? Well, that can't be, because in the place that it came from, a kista of fish stew, a certain amount of fish stew, costs 1 luma, and a kista of wine costs 4 luma. In other words, and from the place where it came from, wine is more expensive than fish stew. So nobody in their right mind who has financial interest, and obviously these people on the boat are coming to sell it, so they would not add wine because that wine is more expensive. It's better to sell the wine by itself. You wouldn't dilute something inexpensive with something more expensive. And so, therefore, there's no reason to think that anybody would have added wine beforehand. Over here in Akko, where fish stew is a higher price than wine, now we are afraid that someone will get some wine over here for cheap and put it in the fish stew. So that's why I have to put guards over here, because of the price difference. So this is an important rule, that if there's financial interest of the person selling something to make it non-kosher, then you have to put a guard all the time. But if it's against his financial interest, then you can assume that he did not put anything unkosher in it. Amar le Rabbi Yirmiyah Rabbi Zara, Dilma ay de sor de atu de shave hamra. Amar le hatam ikule uf shure ika. Rabbi Yirmiyah asked Rabbi Zara, but maybe this boat came on the way and it passed by Tyre, and that city on Tyre up north, over there wine is not expensive, and so you should worry that while it was on the way over there, maybe they did add wine to the fish stew. But Rabbi Zera says no, they would not have traveled that way, because there's impediments there, there's melted snow, there's icebergs, and nobody would have traveled that route. Rather, they would have come straight, not from Tyre, and the place that it came from is a place where the wine was more expensive, and therefore you don't have to worry about anyone adding wine before, but only from now on. Ugvinat bet unyake. And now we have the cheese from this place called bet unyake. The Mishnah says is prohibited. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish mipnei ma asru gvinat unyake. Resh Lakish asks, why is this cheese prohibited? Mipnei sherov agalim shelota ir nishchatin la avoda zara. And the answer is because most of the calves of that city are slaughtered for idolatry. And when they're going to make the cheese, they're going to put milk in the stomach of those calves. And since the calf was slaughtered for Avodah Zarah, you can't get any benefit from it. And therefore, the cheese that they make in those calves are also prohibited. We ask about this. Why in your answer did you tell me that most of the calves, the majority of calves, are slaughtered for Avodah Zarah, and therefore it's prohibited? Why a majority? Even if it was only a minority, don't you have to worry about a minority? Also, if a minority of things are not kosher, you still can't eat them. After all, the Meir worries about a minority of things. Meir says this regarding a law of Yibum, that we worry about a minority of cases in that context. So we're applying that here also. And so, even if it was not a majority, even as a minority, just say that there are some calves that are slaughtered for Avodah Zarah, and then we would know that it's prohibited. So we answer, I amart rov ika mi'ut. אלא אי אמרת מיעוט, כיוון דאיקה רוב עגלים דאין נשחטין לעבודה זרה, ואיקה נמה שאר בהמות דאין נשחטין לעבודה זרה, הווה למיעוטה דמיעוטה, ומיעוטה דמיעוטה, לך האיש רבי מאיר. No, we need to say, it has to be a majority of calves, because only calves were slaughtered for Avodah Zarah. They only liked slaughtering calves. So, if you say the majority of calves are given to Avodah Zarah, then if you take into account all animals, it's a minority, because most animals are not calves. There's all kinds of other animals, and so you have a single minority are calves that are given to Avodah Zarah. And there we have to worry about that because you have a minority. But if it was only a minority of calves that were slaughtered for Avodah Zarah, and most calves were not slaughtered for Avodah Zarah, then since you have most calves that are not slaughtered for Avodah Zarah, and there are also most other animals that are also not slaughtered for Avodah Zarah, then the animals that are slaughtered for Avodah Zarah are a minority of a minority. And when it comes to a minority of a minority, the Meir says you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about such a small minority. Therefore, it has to be that it was the majority of calves. Again, if it was the minority of calves were given to Avodah Zarah, that's a minority of calves, and calves are a minority of all the animals that are around. So that's a minority of minority. You don't have to worry about that. Then it would be kosher. And so the only reason that it was not kosher is because the majority of calves are given to Avodah Zarah, and that's the ones they use for making cheese. And therefore, the cheese from that place is prohibited. Amar le Rabbi Shimon ben Eliakim le Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Ki nishchatin avodah zara ma'haveh v'ha atu deshareh. Now, Rabbi Shimon ben Eliakim asks Resh Lakish, even if they slaughter these calves for idolatry, so what? You yourself, Resh Lakish, are the one who permits such an animal. What are we talking about? The itmar. Hashochet et behema lizrok dama la'avodah zara. Laktir chelba la'avodah zara. Rabbi Yochanan amar asura kasabar mechashebin me'avodah la'avodah v'yalfinan chus mipinim. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish omer muteret. So here's a machlok. It's someone who slaughters an animal with intention that he is going to sprinkle its blood to an idol or burn its fat to an idol. So the slaughtering itself, he's just making a slaughter, but he intends that after the slaughter, he's going to do something with avodah zarah, with the blood or the fat. In that case, Rabbi Yochanan says the animal is prohibited because he says that we compare we consider thought of avodah zarah to be prohibitive because we learn that which is done outside from that which is done inside. Inside means in the Bet HaMikdash. And so in the Bet HaMikdash, if one is making a proper korban in the Bet HaMikdash to Hashem, not avodah zarah, and if one has improper intention while slaughtering, while cutting the neck of a korban, while he's cutting the neck, he has in mind, I'm going to sprinkle the blood, and 3 days from now, at the wrong time, in the wrong place. This makes the korban prohibited. Even though he didn't actually do it, but he had in mind that he would do it at the time of slaughter, it makes the slaughter itself no good. And Rabbi Akiva learns from the laws of proper sacrifices to the laws of idolatry, that just like with a proper sacrifice, improper thought will make the slaughter no good, so too regarding idolatrous slaughter, even though the slaughter itself, you don't have in mind that the slaughtering is going to be an act of worship, just slaughtering, having in mind that I'm going to make this animal a korban, I'm going to burn it to idolatry, that also makes it prohibited. Therefore, according to Rabbi Yochanan, this law makes sense because these calves, they slaughter it for avodah zarah, and just by slaughtering it, having in mind that I'm going to use it, intending to use it for avodah zarah later, makes the slaughtering already, makes the animal prohibited. But Resh Lakish says it's permitted. Resh Lakish does not compare slaughtering slaughtering an animal outside to slaughtering an animal inside. Of course, Resh Lakish would agree that if you slaughter a korban in the Bet HaMikdash with improper intention, then it makes it no good. But when it comes to slaughtering an animal that you intend that you're going to sprinkle its blood to avodah zarah, if you didn't actually sprinkle its blood to avodah zarah, then it doesn't ruin the shechita, and that animal is not prohibited as avodah zarah. And so here's the question, Resh Lakish, you yourself said that if you slaughter an animal with intention that you're going to offer the blood for avodah zarah, the animal right now is still permitted. And so therefore, in this place where they slaughter these animals with intention that they will use it for avodah zarah, but right now it's permitted. So therefore, cheese that they make in the stomach of these animals should be permitted. Amar le tir minach sha'atach behomer bigmar zebicha hu obda. Resh Lakish said to Rabbi Shimon ben Eliakim, may your fortune be auspicious, meaning chazak baruch. It's a good question that you're asking, but I do have an answer. We're talking about a case where the person says while he's slaughtering that the worshipping of the idol should occur at the conclusion of the slaughter. In other words, he wants the slaughtering itself to be an act of idolatry. If he said, I'm slaughtering it so that then I'll get the blood and I'll do idolatry with the blood, then the animal is permitted to use. But we're talking about a case here where he said, I want the slaughtering to be an act of Avodah Zara, and right at the conclusion, that will conclude the Avodah Zara that I'm going to do with this animal. Then the animal becomes prohibited immediately upon its slaughter. And that's what they do in this place, and therefore the cheese that comes from this place is made in those stomachs and is prohibited. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Sha'al Rabbi Ishmael. Back to the Mishnah where Rabbi Yehuda says that Rabbi Ishmael asked Rabbi Yoshua a bunch of questions. We're going to get back to those questions about why is cheese of non-Jews prohibited. But we're going to go on a detour about a related subject. Amarav Achdeboy Amarav Hamkadesh beperesh shor haniskal mikudeshet beperesh agle avodah zara ena mikudeshet ibayet ema sevara v'ibayet ema kera. Rav said that if a man betroths a woman, not in a very nice way, but with excrement of an ox. Okay, so not a nice way to do something in the first place, but in order for Kiddushin to be effective, it just has to be worth a peruta. And this waste is useful. You can sell it on the market for fertilizer, and so it is worth a peruta. So that's not the problem. The problem is that it comes from an ox that's prohibited. Now we're going to compare two types of prohibited oxen. One is an ox that deserves to be stoned. Let's say the ox killed someone. Okay, you bring it to court and you say, this ox is going to be stoned, and in the meantime, one cannot get any benefit from the ox itself. You can't get benefit from its skin, not its meat, no part of the ox. But what about its waste? The waste, if someone takes it, then he can use that, meaning it's not prohibited from getting benefit from it. Has value and he can use it, and if he gives it to a woman, they will be married. However, if it's from a calf that was used for idolatry, then the waste also is prohibited. Now, what's the difference? Both of these animals are prohibited from benefit. So how come in one, the waste you can benefit from, and there is Kiddushin, and the other one you're not allowed to benefit from? Since you're not allowed to benefit from it, has no value, and therefore the Kiddushin is invalid. What's the difference? So we're going to have two answers. One is based on reason, one is based on a pasuk. When it comes to Avodah Zara, the owner wants it to look fat. The fatter it is, the nicer of a sacrifice it will be. And therefore, when the waste is inside, that makes it a little bit fatter. And so it's part of the animal. And it's part of the prohibition of the animal as an animal of Avodah Zarah. And therefore, the whole animal, including its waste, is part of the prohibition, and therefore one cannot get benefit from it. Whereas with an ox that's stoned, he doesn't care if it's fatter; he's going to be stoned and then disposed of. So he doesn't care if it looks fatter because he's not offering it to an idol, and therefore he doesn't care about the waste that is in the animal, and therefore that waste is not considered part of the animal, and so the prohibition against using the waste does not apply. That's one answer based on reason. Lo yidbak biyadecha me'uma uchtivatam sakol yisakel hashor velo yachelet besaro asur ha pirsho muteret. Regarding something used for idol worship, the pasuk says there shall not cleave anything of a dedicated thing to your hand, something that's dedicated to Avodah Zarah. You can't use any part of it at all. So this is a blanket prohibition no matter what, and that will include waste. Whereas regarding an ox that deserves capital punishment, it just says that it shall be stoned and you cannot eat its flesh. The flesh is prohibited, but the waste, there's no prohibition about that. Amar Rava, Tarvaihu Tenanhi. Rava says both of these laws that we just learned from Rav Achtevoy in the name of Rav, we can also derive from our Mishnah. In the conversation, Rabbi Yoshua said to Rabbi Ishmael, when he asked him, how come cheese of non-Jews is prohibited? He answered, because they curdle the milk in the stomach of a nevela, an animal that did not get proper shechita, which is not kosher, and therefore all the parts of the animal are not kosher. Vekam mehadar le v'halo kevat ola chamura mikevat nevela mikilal de isure hana'a sharu pirshaihu. But Rabbi Yishmael responded to Rabbi Yoshua and says that's not a sufficient answer, because compare this to the stomach of a korban olah. A korban olah generally is more stringent than a nevela animal. Korban olah, no one can eat it. You have to burn the whole thing, otherwise it's me'ilah. And yet, so generally a stomach of an olah, just like a whole olah animal, is going to be more stringent. Its law is going to be more stringent than a stomach of a nevela. And yet, we learned that if a kohen wants to, although it's pretty disgusting, he can go ahead and swallow a stomach of an olah, and they would be permitted for him to do so. He doesn't cook it or anything, he just swallows it raw. So, if that's permitted, what's the reason he can swallow it raw? Because it's not considered actually part of the animal. This is stuff that's in the stomach, it happens to be in the stomach, but it's other enzymes and things that are in there that are not considered part of the animal, and therefore he is allowed to eat it. So certainly that would be true for a nevela, and so we can learn from here that isure hana'a, that something, even though the whole animal itself is prohibited from getting benefit from it, but something that's just in the animal, but not part of the animal, it's not attached to it, is permitted. So just like the stomach and the enzymes in the stomach are permitted to eat, so too the excrement would be permitted to eat. And so that's how we can derive one of the laws of Rav Achtevoy, and we can learn the other law as well. Right after the continuation of the conversation, Rabbi Yoshua says, I changed my mind. It's not because they make the cheese by putting it in the stomach of a nevela animal, but rather because they put it in the stomach of an Avoda Zara animal. And to that Rabbi Yishmael said, well, in that case, if they curdle the milk in a stomach of an Avodah Zara animal, then how come the rabbis only prohibit it to eat, but permitted to get benefit? So what do we see from that answer? We assume that something that was a part inside an animal that is dedicated to Avodah Zarah, even the other parts that are not connected to the animal, but inside the animal, are also prohibited, and that would apply to excrement as well. So the point is that in the Mishnah, we see through the conversation that there is a difference between a nevela animal and an avodah zarah animal. The stomach lining of a nevela animal is permitted to eat, just like a korban olah. One can eat that. It's not considered part of the animal, and that would be the same would be true for excrement of such an animal. However, in the continuation of the conversation, they say, if the animal's for avodah zarah, then the stomach is prohibited, because even though it's not technically part of the flesh of the animal, it's still prohibited, and that would be true, therefore, also for the excrement of the animal. The Gemara next analyzes the continuation of the conversation in the Mishnah, where in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yoshua diverts the conversation to a different matter altogether. Why did he have to do that? Why didn't he answer Rabbi Ishmael's question in a proper way? And Rabbi Ishmael's question again was that if indeed you're worried that the non-Jews will curdle the milk in the stomach with the rennet of an idolatrous animal, then it should be prohibited not only to eat, but also to get benefit from it. So Rabbi Yoshua has an answer to that. He could say, it's okay to get benefit from this cheese because the prohibited substance is no longer there. You take the milk. The milk is kosher when it starts off. You put it in the stomach of an avodah zarah animal, and so now the rennet that's inside, those enzymes are going to work on the milk and separate the curds and the whey turn it into cheese. Okay, then you take it out. Now, that rennet is not in the milk. It's just an enzyme that helps break down the milk, but it's not there anymore. So I understand why it should be prohibited to eat, because it was with that rennet from this idolatrous animal. But it makes sense not to say that it's prohibited from benefit, because that prohibited substance is now no longer there. And this is true because we can compare it to the fish stew. Fish stew that, according to the rabbis, is only prohibited to eat. Because we're afraid that they put wine in it sometimes, but you can get benefit from it. Why is it permitted to get benefit from it? Is it not because there's no substance in it? Even if the fish stew contains a little bit of wine, but that wine is not discernible. The taste of the fish stew is so strong that you don't have to worry about the wine. So we see that when there's some prohibited something is made together with some prohibited item, but even if it's an Avoda Zara item, so, idolatrous animal or idolatrous wine, if the substance is there, then yes, it's going to be prohibited to get benefit from it. But if it was added and it helps out in the processing, but the substance is no longer there or no longer significant, then it's only prohibited to eat, but not to get benefit from it. That would have been a very good answer for Rabbi Yoshua to tell Rabbi Ishmael. Amri hacha kevan de ukme kam mokim chashiv le keman deite lisure be'aineh. And we answer, very important answer, that there's a fundamental difference between the fish stew and the curdling of cheese. In the fish stew, where they add a little wine just for the processing of it, so it comes out better, but the taste isn't there. So there, the substance is not important anymore. But here, regarding the cheese, the rennet has an essential role in making the cheese because the rennet is what curdles it. It's considered something that is substantial. It is not just something that's you add a little bit just so like it looks better, but rather this is what actually creates it. So even though it's a very small amount and you can't taste it and you say it's batel, it's not batel if this is the essential ingredient that makes it cheese in the first place. And so this is why there's a lot of stringency around cheese making, because even if the rennet is only a tiny bit, it's an essential ingredient that creates it, and therefore it's not going to be nullified. And if it comes from a place of idolatry, then it should be prohibited. The cheese should be prohibited not only to eat, but also to get benefit from it. And so this was a real good question that Rabbi Ishmael answered, and Rabbi Yoshua was not able to give a simple answer to this. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen ve'amen.